Picture this. You've opened your home and heart to family for 8 long years, only to discover they've been systematically working to steal it from under your nose. When my daughter-in-law Jessica pushed my 65-year-old wife Dorothy to the ground and screamed, "Don't touch him, you're filthy," that's when I knew our generosity had become their weapon. But what I discovered next about their secret plan to take our house, well, let's just say the 3 words I spoke to my son that day changed everything forever. My name is Robert, and I'm 69 years old, and I never thought I'd be telling this story. But sometimes life forces you to confront truths you've been avoiding for years. 8 years ago, when our son Michael and his wife Jessica moved into our home, Dorothy and I thought we were doing the right thing. They were struggling financially. We had the space, and family should help family, right? Michael was our only child, and we wanted to give his marriage the best chance to succeed. 8 years. That's how long Dorothy and I opened our home, our hearts, and our wallets to a woman who would eventually show us exactly what she thought of our kindness. The morning everything changed started like any other. Dorothy was in the kitchen, her silver hair catching the morning light as she arranged fresh flowers in a vase. At 65, my wife still found joy in these small moments. I was reading my newspaper when I heard the crying. Not just any crying, but the sharp, demanding wail of our newborn grandson, James. He'd arrived 3 days earlier, and suddenly our whole house was walking on eggshells around Jessica's very specific rules about noise, visitors, and routines. "Robert, could you ask Dorothy to keep it down in there?" Jessica's voice carried from the living room, sharp with irritation. "The baby needs his rest." I looked up from my paper. Dorothy was barely making any noise at all, just the soft clink of dishes. But this had become typical. Over the years, Jessica had developed an endless list of things Dorothy needed to do differently in her own home. I heard Dorothy's gentle footsteps approaching the living room, probably to see if she could help with baby James. My wife had been so excited about being a grandmother. She'd spent weeks preparing, buying tiny clothes, dreaming about all the ways she'd spoil our first grandchild. Then I heard it, the sound that changed everything. A sharp thud, followed by Dorothy's surprised gasp and the crash of something hitting the floor. I dropped my newspaper and rushed toward the living room, my heart already racing. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. Dorothy was on the ground, her face flushed with pain and embarrassment. The fresh flowers she'd been carrying were scattered across our hardwood floor, water spreading in a dark stain near her knees. She was trying to gather herself, confused and hurt, looking up at Jessica with wide, bewildered eyes. Jessica stood over her, holding our grandson, her face twisted with disgust and fury. "Don't you dare touch him!" she screamed at Dorothy, who hadn't even been reaching for the baby. "You're dirty! Look at this mess you've made! You think I'm going to let filthy hands anywhere near my son?" My 65-year-old wife, the woman who had raised Michael with more love and patience than any child deserved, was sitting on our floor being called dirty in her own home. The silence that followed was deafening. Even baby James stopped crying, as if sensing the weight of what had just happened. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears, not from physical pain, but from the crushing humiliation of being treated like a servant who had overstepped her bounds. Something broke inside me in that moment. Not just my heart, but something deeper. The realization that I had allowed this woman to turn my home into her personal domain, where my wife of 4 decades was treated like an unwelcome intruder. "Dorothy," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest, "let me help you." As I helped Dorothy to her feet, I caught sight of something in Jessica's expression. Satisfaction. She was enjoying this. The power, the control, the way she could humiliate my wife and face no consequences. "Michael!" I called out, my voice cutting through the tension. My son appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable but not nearly as shocked as he should have been. That's when I realized he'd been watching this happen for months, maybe years, and done nothing to stop it. But what I was about to discover about Jessica's true plans would make this incident look like child's play. The next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than I'd realized. Jessica's words from that morning kept echoing in my mind, and I started paying attention to things I'd been too trusting to notice before. It was Thursday afternoon when I made the discovery that changed everything. I was looking for our homeowner's insurance documents in my old filing cabinet, which I'd moved to the basement when Michael and Jessica took over my office. As I rifled through folders that hadn't been touched in months, I found something that made my blood run cold. Mixed in with our personal documents were papers I'd never seen before. Official-looking forms with our address on them, but not our names. I pulled out a stack of documents, my hands trembling as I read them. Utility bills, but not in my name or Dorothy's. They were in Jessica's name. Not just one bill, but several months' worth. Electric, gas, water, cable, internet, all transferred to Jessica Patterson. But that wasn't the worst part. At the bottom of the stack was a form I recognized but couldn't immediately believe. A mail forwarding request with the Postal Service, redirecting all mail for our address to come under Jessica's name first, dated 6 months ago. I sat down hard on an old chair in our basement, staring at the papers in disbelief. Jessica had been systematically putting our home services in her name, without telling us, without asking permission. I climbed the stairs with shaking legs and went straight to our mailbox. Sure enough, when I really looked at the mail we'd been receiving, I noticed that most of it was addressed to J. Patterson at our address, with our actual mail mixed in almost as an afterthought. How had I missed this? How long had she been intercepting our mail, our bills, our personal correspondence? I walked back into the house and found Dorothy in the kitchen, quietly preparing lunch. She looked up when I entered, and I could see the question in her eyes. "Dorothy," I said, keeping my voice low, "when was the last time you saw our electric bill?" She frowned, thinking. "Well, you usually handle those, Robert, but now that you mention it, I haven't seen any bills lying around in months. I assumed you were paying them online now." "I'm not paying them online. I haven't seen them either." Dorothy's face went pale. "What do you mean?" I showed her the documents I'd found, watched her face change as she realized what they meant. But then I overheard something that made everything crystal clear. As I stood in our hallway, I could hear Jessica's voice drifting from the living room. She was on the phone with someone, and her tone was completely different from the exhausted new mother act she put on around us. "Oh, it's perfect," she was saying, her voice animated and confident. "We have the whole place basically to ourselves. The old woman mostly stays upstairs now, and Robert's completely manageable. Michael does whatever I tell him to do." I stopped walking, frozen by what I was hearing. "No, we're not planning to move anytime soon," Jessica continued. "Why would we? Free house, free food, built-in babysitting. It's like winning the lottery, except easier." The person on the other end must have said something, because Jessica laughed, a sound I'd rarely heard in our house. "Trust me, they're not going anywhere. Dorothy's too beaten down to cause trouble, and Robert's too much of a pushover to make demands. By the time they realize what's happening, we'll have everything exactly how we want it." I stood frozen in our hallway, listening to my daughter-in-law discuss our family like we were marks in some long-term con game. The casual cruelty in her voice, the complete lack of gratitude or affection, made me realize that what happened with Dorothy wasn't an isolated incident. It was Jessica showing her true face for the first time, confident that there would be no consequences. After that phone call, I spent the next few days watching more carefully. And what I discovered made my stomach turn. Jessica hadn't just been taking over our household. She'd been researching how to take over our house. Hidden in our own filing cabinet, I found property transfer forms, deed research, and notes in Jessica's handwriting about property values and inheritance laws. She'd even had someone impersonating a county assessor come to our house to gather information while I was at a doctor's appointment. The final piece fell into place when I confronted Michael with everything I'd found. My son's face went through every emotion possible as he looked at the evidence of his wife's systematic deception. "Dad," he said quietly, "what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying your wife has spent months transferring our utilities to her name, redirecting our mail, researching property transfers, and planning to steal our house." Michael stared at the papers in his hands. "She's actually trying to take your house?" "That's exactly what she's trying to do." And that's when I knew I had to make the hardest decision of my life. The choice between keeping peace in the family and protecting everything Dorothy and I had worked for our entire lives. I called my lawyer immediately. Within 24 hours, we had formal legal papers drawn up requiring Jessica to transfer all utilities back to our names within 7 days, cancel the mail forwarding, and vacate our property within 30 days. We also filed formal complaints for identity theft, mail fraud, and attempted property fraud. When the process server arrived at our door that Tuesday morning, I watched through the window as Jessica answered, baby James in her arms. The moment she realized what was happening, her face went through a range of emotions I'll never forget. Confusion, recognition, then pure rage. She slammed the door so hard that baby James started crying. Within an hour, she was in our living room, her face flushed with fury, demanding to speak with Michael and me. Dorothy had wisely gone to visit her sister, not wanting to be present for what was sure to be ugly. "You can't do this to me!" Jessica screamed, waving the legal papers in the air. "I have rights. I've been living here for 8 years." "You have the right to leave voluntarily," I said calmly. "That's about it." "Michael, tell your father he's making a mistake. Tell him what this will do to our family." Michael, to his credit, had clearly spent the past few days thinking about his priorities. "Jessica, what you've done is illegal. Dad is being more than fair by giving you a chance to fix it voluntarily."
"Fix what? I haven't done anything wrong," she protested.
"You've committed identity theft,
By putting their bills in your name, Michael said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. You've committed mail fraud by redirecting their mail. You've researched ways to transfer their house to your name. These are felonies, Jessica. That's when her composure cracked completely. Yes, I put bills in my name, she screamed. Yes, I took control. Someone needed to take control around here because nothing was getting done right. The breathtaking arrogance left us speechless for a moment. Do you know how frustrating it is to watch things being handled inefficiently when you know you could do it better? She continued. I've been managing this household, maintaining these systems, improving this property. That has value. That's worth something. Not ownership, I said firmly. Isn't it? Her eyes were blazing now. At what point does sweat equity become actual equity? At what point does the person who's actually running the household get a say in how it's run? I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't just about bills and convenience. This was about a fundamental belief that her 8 years of living in our house had given her ownership rights. Jessica, I said carefully, do you think you own this house? She looked at me like I was being deliberately dense. I think I've earned a stake in this house. I've earned a stake in the house where I've lived for 8 years, where I've raised my family, where I've contributed my time and energy to make it better. You can't just claim ownership of someone else's property because you've been living there, Michael said, staring at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Can't I? She shot back. What about tenant rights? What about the fact that I've been the primary person managing this property for years? That's when she played her final, desperate card. Fine, she said, standing up abruptly with baby James. You want me gone? I'll go. But I'm taking my son with me, and you'll never see him again. Michael's face went white. Jessica, don't do this. Protect my child from people who would destroy his family over money? I'll make sure you never see him again. And that's when I spoke the 3 words that changed everything forever. I looked directly at Jessica, then turned to my son Michael and said with absolute certainty, "This stops now." Those 3 simple words, "This stops now," weren't just about the immediate situation. They were about 8 years of gradual boundary violations, 8 years of my wife being diminished in her own home, 8 years of watching generosity be weaponized against us. Michael heard something in my voice that told him this was the moment of truth. He looked at his wife, then at me, and made his choice. You're right, Dad. This stops now. He turned to Jessica. I am filing for divorce, and I'm requesting full custody. A mother who commits felony fraud against her own child's grandparents isn't someone who should have unsupervised custody. The legal process moved swiftly. Jessica was convicted of mail fraud and identity theft, sentenced to 2 years of probation and community service. Michael was awarded primary custody of baby James, with Jessica getting supervised visitation every other weekend. Today, 3 years later, Michael lives 4 blocks away in his own house, close enough that we can walk over for dinner. Close enough that baby James can ride his bicycle to our house after school. Close enough that Dorothy can babysit whenever Michael needs her to. Dorothy is happy again. She sings while she cooks, tends her garden with joy, plays with her grandson without fear of criticism. Our home feels like our home again. Sometimes protecting your family means making the hardest choices.
Sometimes love requires saying no to the people who would take advantage of your generosity. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever had someone in your life who slowly crossed boundaries until you barely recognized your own home, your own relationships, or even yourself? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. If stories like this resonate with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Hidden Hearth. We share real stories about real families navigating life's most challenging moments. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is simply say, "This stops now."